The state of Oklahoma received nearly $1.6 billion in CARES Act funding last March, money that by current law must be spent by the end of this month or returned to the federal government. So how much has been spent and on what? Jason Doyle has our report.
As of December 10th, Oklahoma has spent more than $914 million of the nearly $1.6 billion allotted by Congress. That information and more is accessible to anyone at the website caresact.ok.gov as intended by state leaders.
And so anybody can go to caresact.ok.gov and look on the transparency dashboard and see how those funds were spent.
One of the most recent programs to use money from Oklahoma's allotment of CARES Act funding focuses on help for arts and culture endeavors across the state.
We're thrilled with $3 billion to invest as COVID relief funding. And just like it sounds, relief, it is supposed to be given to arts and cultural organizations that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic.
The Oklahoma Arts Council accepted applications until a deadline earlier this week. That $3 million will be parsed out in chunks of $2,500 to $100,000 grants over the next week.
We hope that these funds will reimburse organizations who have been pivoting in this space to either provide partial programming or have had to digitize their programs to provide arts education and arts access.
The Arts and Culture Industry Relief Program is just a part of the overall allotment of federal funds the state's received. Out of the nearly $1.6 billion coming to Oklahoma, $1.2 billion is managed by Governor Stitt, with some of the funding going directly to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma County, Tulsa County, and a special fund for education needs.
Obviously, we want to make sure these tax dollars, even though they're federal dollars and not state dollars, they're still public tax dollars. We want to make sure they're spent efficiently, but also want to make sure that we spend them for our citizens.
Representative Kyle Hilbert is a member of the Legislative Advisory Group, which works with the governor on ways to distribute the funds.
I do appreciate that the governor was willing and had an open ear to listen to us when we had suggestions on how those funds could be better spent.
One of the largest parts of the program is $250 million allotted to help cities and counties with COVID-related expenses. For example, the city of Moore has received nearly $4.8 million in CARES Act funds. They've used it for things like communications, disinfection of public areas, and telework setups, with a big portion going to COVID-dedicated payroll expenses.
Most of what we filed for the reimbursement was for our public safety, our first responders, police, fire, for payroll, for those people. And so, that makes up the vast majority of it.
City Manager Brooks Mitchell says the funding helped the city of Moore continue to operate the government for the people as the pandemic raged. He says improvements are still being made.
We're in the process of making improvements to our council chambers because it became apparent to us that remote meetings were probably going to be more common in the future than what they are now.
For another example of CARES Act funds helping another city, we go to Weatherford.
It was really a lifesaver for the city of Weatherford. Our sales tax, which is what we're dependent on, was down about 7% for the year. So that equates to, close to $800,000. So, that $800,000 that we got, or the $900,000 plus that we got from the CARES Act, basically made us whole again.
The city of Weatherford has received nearly $1 million in reimbursements. The western Oklahoma college town had to increase public safety measures, improve telework capability, communicate issues with the public. However, the lion's share went to police and fire.
Basically, we were reimbursed for our police and fire, their salaries and overtime. And so basically we were able to, put that money back into our budget to cover those particular items.
Mayor Mike Brown says the funding helped make City Hall safer.
Of course, we followed all the CDC guidelines as far as putting up the barriers between our, people that are working the counters, try to do the social distancing and encourage the mask.
All in all, the CARES Act funds managed by Governor Stitt seem to have helped.
None of us anticipated a pandemic, and that means those budgets didn't have those funds budgeted for. So we know that those are really impacting these organizations. Many of them, which are nonprofits, they're trying to do mission-based work. And so the bottom line is really getting hit by the pandemic.
It's made a big difference for us, and I'm sure, every other community that's received this money or county can make the same statement.
We're thankful that the state handled it the way they did this first go round as far as sending it to each individual city. Like I said, we certainly benefited from that.
Government leaders tell us as long as the remainder of the coronavirus relief fund is allotted by December 30th, the federal government won't demand the money back. Jason Doyle, the Oklahoma News Report.